My name is Olivia, and I became a single mom when my daughter, Julie, was just 11 years old. My ex-husband, James, decided he found someone better and left us. Just like that, he was gone, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our broken family. From that moment on, it was just Julie and me. I threw myself into work, determined to give her everything she needed. I climbed the corporate ladder, worked overtime, and took on extra projects, anything to make sure she never went without. But the pain of being abandoned hit her hard. She became distant, angry, and her grades started dropping. She would get upset over the smallest things, and I didn't know how to help. I was doing everything I could to be both mom and dad, the provider and the comforter, but it felt like I was failing. Finally, I decided to take her to see a psychologist. Dr. Virginia was kind and patient, but even she had a tough time reaching Julie. "Your daughter is dealing with a lot of pain," she told me after a particularly tough session. "It's going to take time, Olivia. Be patient with her." Years passed, and things seemed to improve, or at least I thought they did. Julie grew into a beautiful, smart young woman. On the surface, it looked like she was healing, but I could feel something wasn't quite right. There was a quiet resentment in her that I couldn't fully understand. It wasn't until I started dating again that I saw how deep the damage really was. Whenever I met someone new, someone who showed real interest in me as a person, not just as Julie's mom, she would get upset. The first time it happened, I was completely caught off guard. I had been seeing Donald for a few weeks, and things were going well. He was kind, funny, and seemed to genuinely care about me. I thought it was time for him to meet Julie. One morning at breakfast, I decided to tell her. "Honey," I said, "I've invited someone over for dinner tonight. His name is Donald, and I want the two most important people in my life to meet each other." Julie stopped eating and looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Is he your boyfriend or something?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "We've been seeing each other, yes," I admitted, "but it's not serious yet. That's why I want you to meet him." Her response was cold and immediate. "No," she said firmly. "I don't want to meet him. I don't want him in our house. Cancel the dinner." I was stunned. "Julie, sweetie," I started, but I didn't know what to say. "I know this might be hard for you," I said gently. "Hard," she shouted, standing up so fast her chair tipped over. "You think this is hard? You want to abandon me, just like he did. Start a new family and forget all about me." She stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and a sinking feeling in my chest. I should have known then this was just the beginning. Despite her outburst, I decided to go ahead with the dinner. I thought maybe if she met Donald, she'd realize he wasn't a threat. I couldn't have been more wrong. Donald arrived at 8, looking nervous but trying to stay positive. I introduced him to Julie, who barely looked at him. "Nice to meet you, Julie," he said, offering his hand. "Your mom's told me a lot about you." Julie ignored his hand completely. "I bet she has," she muttered under her breath. The tension in the room was unbearable. We sat down to eat, and I tried to keep the conversation light. But Julie's short answers and cold stares made it nearly impossible. Halfway through the meal, Donald made a harmless comment about how nice it was to have a home-cooked dinner. That's when Julie lost it. "Oh, I bet you'd love to have this all the time, wouldn't you?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Playing happy families with my mom." "Julie," I warned, my voice firm. But she didn't stop. "What, Mom? Isn't that what this is? You're trying to replace Dad, trying to get rid of me like he did." "That's not true," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm not trying to replace anyone." "Then what are you trying to do?" she snapped. "Ruin everything?" She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Well, guess what? I won't let you." Before I could say anything, she grabbed her plate and hurled it onto the floor. The sound of the plate shattering echoed through the room. "Julie," I gasped. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. She grabbed another plate and smashed it, then another. Food and broken dishes were everywhere. "This is our home," she screamed. "Ours, not his." Donald stood up, looking stunned. "I think I should go," he said softly. After Donald left, Julie locked herself in her room. I stayed up late cleaning the mess, tears streaming down my face and mixing with the soapy water as I scrubbed the floor. The next morning, Julie acted like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. From that day on, every time I tried to date, it was the same anger, tantrums, and hostility. As the years went by, I started pushing people away. It was easier than dealing with Julie's outbursts. I told myself it was temporary, that one day she'd grow up and understand. But deep down, I knew I was just making excuses. By the time Julie graduated high school, I realized how much I had let her control my life. I was so proud of Julie. Despite everything, she had done well in school and gotten into a good college. I thought maybe things would finally change. The night before she left for college, she said, "Mom, you won't bring anyone home while I'm gone, will you?" I sighed. "Julie, honey, you're starting a new chapter of your life. Don't you think it's time I start mine too?" Her face darkened. "So, you're planning to replace me?" "Julie, please," I said, trying to keep calm. "That's not fair. I've spent the last 9 years putting you first. I've given up everything for you." The moment I said it, I regretted it. Her eyes filled with tears. "So, I'm just a burden to you? A sacrifice you had to make," she cried. "No, sweetie, that's not what I meant at all," I said quickly, trying to fix my mistake. But it was too late. She stormed off to her room and slammed the door. The next morning, Julie left for college, without saying goodbye. With her away, I finally had time to focus on myself. I got a new haircut, bought some clothes I liked, and even joined a gym. I reconnected with old friends, went out more, and eventually met Timothy. He was kind, funny, and understood my complicated relationship with Julie. We started dating, and for a while, life felt good. But even from college, Julie tried to control my life. Every time she called or visited, she would question me about my social life. "Mom, you haven't let anyone into our house, have you?" she'd ask. I tried to reason with her. "Julie, you're building your own life now. Don't you think it's time I do the same?" But she would get angry. She even threatened to drop out of college, saying she couldn't focus because I was replacing her. When she found out about Timothy, she called me in tears. "How could you do this to me? My grades are suffering because I'm so upset about you dating." It was exhausting. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to balance my happiness with her demands. Still, I kept hoping things would improve once she graduated and started her own life. 5 years passed in this back and forth. Then, out of the blue, Julie called. "Mom, I'm coming home, and I'm bringing someone with me." My heart leapt. Maybe she had found someone. Maybe now she'd understand why I wanted to date, and that it didn't mean I loved her any less. When they arrived, I was shocked. Julie introduced the man beside her, not as her boyfriend, but as her husband. "This is Gary," she said, giving me a challenging look. "We got married last week in Vegas." I couldn't believe it. My daughter was married, and I hadn't even known she was dating someone. "Julie," I gasped. "Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited?" She shrugged. "We only met a few days ago. It was spontaneous." They didn't stay long. As they were leaving, I hugged Julie tightly. "I hope you'll be very happy," I whispered, trying to ignore the knot of worry in my stomach. For 7 months, I barely heard from her. I tried to give them space, hoping they were settling into married life. Then one rainy night, Julie showed up at my door, her face streaked with mascara. "He cheated on me," she sobbed. "I found him with another woman. We're getting divorced." Julie moved back in with me. She quickly found a job but showed no signs of looking for her own place. Remembering how she had reacted to my earlier attempts to find my own happiness, I didn't push her. I was 47, and Julie was 25. We had settled into an uneasy routine when the doctor gave me news that changed everything. I had intestinal cancer. Hearing the word cancer felt like being hit by a truck. It was terrifying. When I told Julie, she broke down in tears. "Mom," she sobbed, holding onto me tightly, "I'll take care of you. I promise we'll get through this together." In that moment, All our past arguments seemed to disappear. I quit my job, grateful for the savings I had set aside over the years. At least money wouldn't be something we had to worry about on top of everything else. Then the chemotherapy started, bringing a whole new set of challenges. I was constantly tired, nauseous, and in pain. Julie took time off work to care for me. At first, she was attentive and determined, doing everything she could to help. But as the days turned into weeks, the reality of my illness began to weigh on her. The cancer had done terrible damage to my digestive system. I often struggled to use the bathroom and sometimes needed help cleaning myself. It was embarrassing, but I had no choice. On the worst days after chemo sessions, I was too weak to even get to the toilet. I started noticing changes in Julie's attitude. The concern in her eyes was slowly replaced by something else, disgust. She'd wrinkle her nose when she came near me and complain about the smell. "Mom, you stink," she said one day, not even trying to hide her discomfort. "Can't you do something about it?" I wanted to yell at her, to remind her that I was fighting for my life and couldn't control what the cancer and treatments were doing to my body. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. She was trying in her own way, and I told myself that had to be enough. One day, after an especially hard morning, Julie came to me with a serious look on her face. "Mom," she said, avoiding my eyes, "I think I need to go back to work. We should hire a nurse to take care of you." I nodded, hiding my disappointment. "I understand," I said softly. "We'll look into getting a nurse." The clinic where I was receiving treatment assigned me a nurse named Virginia to help at home. She was a blessing, strong, skilled, and always kind. Virginia never made me feel embarrassed or ashamed. When she helped me clean up, she'd smile and say, "Don't worry, Olivia. We'll have you feeling fresh as a daisy in no time." With Virginia's help, my life improved a lot. I felt more comfortable, and it was a relief to have someone who treated me with dignity. But Julie wasn't happy about the arrangement. "I don't like having a stranger in our house all the time," she complained. "It feels invasive." I tried to explain to Julie that Virginia was essential for my care, but she wouldn't listen. Then one evening, she dropped a bombshell. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said in a careful tone. "Maybe it would be better if you moved to a care facility. You'd get round-the-clock help, and I could look after the house." I stared at her in shock. "No. I'm not leaving my home. This is where I feel comfortable, and this is where I'm going to fight this cancer." Her face darkened with frustration. "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way." She stormed off, leaving me feeling a deep sadness. I was fighting for my life, but it felt like I was losing my daughter. The chemo treatments were brutal. Each day brought new challenges and humiliations. But nothing prepared me for the day my hair began falling out. I was in the bathroom, running my fingers through my long hair, once my pride, when clumps came away in my hand. I stared at the strands in shock. Julie's shriek snapped me out of it. "Mom, there's hair everywhere." "I'm so tired of cleaning it up," she yelled, standing in the doorway with a look of disgust. Her words hit hard. I looked at her, searching for some compassion, but found none. In that moment, I made a decision. "Virginia," I called softly to my nurse. "Can you cut my hair?" Virginia nodded and carefully trimmed away the remaining strands. As she worked, I caught a glimpse of Julie in the mirror. Instead of offering comfort, she laughed. "You look like an alien," she said, smirking. "Maybe you should get a wig." Her words hurt more than I could express, cutting deeper than any physical pain. That night, after Virginia left and Julie went to her room, I cried silently into my pillow. I kept asking myself, where had I gone wrong? How had my sweet little girl turned into someone so cold and unkind? Weeks passed, and I kept fighting the cancer, even though every day was a struggle. Then one afternoon, Julie dropped another surprise. "Mom, I'm having some friends over for my birthday next week," she said casually. I blinked, surprised. "Here?" "Julie, I don't think that's a good idea. I need rest. And the noise." Her expression hardened. "If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else for the night. Actually, that might be better. I won't have to be embarrassed by you in front of my friends or deal with the smell." Her words felt like a slap. I had been bedridden for days, barely able to move. But her cruelty gave me the strength to sit up. I fixed her with a glare that would have made my own mother proud. "This is my house," I said firmly. My voice was low but firm. "If you don't like living here with me, you're welcome to leave." Julie's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with anger. "You're so selfish," she screamed. "All you think about is yourself. You know what? It would be better for everyone if you just died already. Then you'd stop being such an inconvenience to everyone around you." The room went silent. I stared at my daughter, stunned, unable to believe what she had just said. In her eyes, there was no love, no kindness, just cold, hard anger. "Get out," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force in my voice. "Pack your things and get out of my house. Now." For a moment, Julie just stood there, frozen. Then, with a scream of frustration, she stormed off to her room. I heard her throwing things into bags, slamming drawers as she packed. A few minutes later, she stormed past me, her bags in hand. "I hate you," she spat as she reached the door. "I wish Dad had taken me with him when he left." And then she was gone, slamming the front door so hard it bounced open. The door stayed ajar, mocking me as a reminder of her dramatic exit. I sat there, staring at it, feeling completely drained. Finally, I reached for my phone with trembling hands and called my friend Abigail. When she answered, I choked out, "Abigail, I need help. Can you come over?" Abigail arrived quickly, concern written all over her face. She closed the door and rushed to my side. "Olivia, what happened?" Everything spilled out. Julie's harsh words, her cruel behavior, and how she had left. Abigail listened, her expression shifting between shock and anger. "Oh, Olivia," she sighed when I finished. "You need to stop worrying about that ungrateful girl and focus on yourself. You're fighting cancer, for God's sake." We talked for hours, tears flowing freely. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I came to a painful realization. "It's my fault," I whispered. "I raised her to be this way. I put her first, ignored my own needs. I thought I was being a good mother, but I was just teaching her to be selfish." Abigail took my hand. "It's not your fault, Olivia. You did your best. But now, it's time to put yourself first." I nodded. "From now on, I'm going to think about myself for once." True to my word, I threw myself into my treatment with new determination. Virginia, my nurse, was a blessing, helping me through the worst days with her kindness and care. I endured 2 more rounds of chemotherapy. They were brutal, leaving me weak and sick, but I refused to give up. Meanwhile, my phone stayed silent. No calls. No texts from Julie. I told myself it was for the best, though it hurt more than I wanted to admit. I needed to focus on my health, but the silence from Julie hurt more than I wanted to admit. Months passed, and during a routine checkup, my doctor smiled, really smiled, for the first time since my diagnosis. "The cancer is receding, Olivia," he said. "You're not out of the woods yet, but this is very, very good news." I left the hospital feeling lighter than I had in months. The world suddenly seemed brighter, full of possibilities I thought I'd lost forever. I was thin and frail after months of illness, and my clothes hung loosely on me. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like myself again. I started taking short walks in the park near my house, letting the sun warm my face and feeling the breeze on what was left of my hair. One afternoon, I stood in front of my closet and realized none of my clothes fit me anymore. But instead of feeling sad, I felt free. It was time for a change, inside and out. I spent a whole day going through my wardrobe, making piles to donate to a local shelter. As I packed up the bags, it felt like I was shedding more than just clothes. I was letting go of the old Olivia, the one who always put everyone else first and let herself be walked over. Looking around my big, empty house, I realized it didn't fit me anymore. It wasn't who I was now. With my savings providing a safety net, I made a bold decision. I wouldn't return to work. Instead, I would downsize and focus on truly living. I contacted a realtor and put my house on the Donald app. It sold quickly, and I found a small, cozy apartment that felt just right for me. Bright, manageable, and full of potential, it was the perfect place for a fresh start. I used the extra money from the sale to secure my financial future, and for the first time in years, I felt safe and at peace. Life was simple and good. I spent my days exploring my new neighborhood, trying new hobbies, and just enjoying being alive. Then, for months after I'd settled into my new life, I received an unexpected phone call. It was the realtor who had sold my old house. "Mrs. Walker," he began, sounding a little awkward, "the new owners of your old home are having some issues. They've asked for your contact information. Is it all right if I give them your numbers?" I felt a mix of curiosity and concern as I considered his question. I agreed, and not long after, my phone rang again. This time, it was the new owner of my old house, Mr. Patrick. "Mrs. Walker," he began, his voice tense, "I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange happened today. A young woman tried to break into the house. First, she tried using a key, and when that didn't work, she started forcing the door open. When I confronted her, she got hysterical, screaming that this was her house and she was supposed to inherit it after her mother's death. The blood drained from my face. It had to be Julie. She must have thought I was dead and come to claim her inheritance. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Patrick," I said, my voice shaking. "I think that might have been my daughter. We've been estranged." "Your daughter," he interrupted, sounding shocked. "But she said you were dead." "I've been very ill, and we haven't spoken in months," I explained, not wanting to go into detail. "Mr. Patrick, could I ask a favor? If she comes back, would you call me?" He agreed, and we ended the call. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay in my new, peaceful life. But I knew I couldn't. This confrontation had been a long time coming. It was time to face Julie and say all the things I should have said years ago. The next day, my phone rang again. "She's here," Mr. Patrick said, his voice tense. "And she's causing quite a scene." I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "I'm on my way." The drive to my old house felt surreal. As I pulled up, I could hear Julie shouting before I even stepped out of the car. Her angry voice carried across the yard. "This is my house," she was yelling at the Patricks, who stood on the porch looking shocked and frightened. "Get out. Now." I got out of the car, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Julie turned and saw me. Her expression shifted from shock to pure rage. "You," she spat. "You're supposed to be dead." I felt an unexpected calm settle over me, a stark contrast to the chaos. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Julie," I said, my voice steady. Her face twisted with fury. "What's going on? Why are these people in our house?" "It's not our house anymore, Julie," I said quietly. "I sold it." Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in anger. "You can't do that. It was supposed to be mine. I was supposed to inherit it when you died." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "I'm sorry I inconvenienced you by surviving," I said, my voice steady. Julie's face turned red with anger. "You don't understand. I have debts. I need money." I shook my head, painfully aware of the Patricks and the small crowd of neighbors watching the scene unfold. "I don't owe you anything, Julie. You abandoned me when I was fighting for my life. You wished I was dead. Why should I help you now?" "Because you're my mother," she screamed. "You're supposed to take care of me." A wave of sadness swept over me, but I didn't waver. "No, Julie. Not anymore. You're an adult. Your choices, your consequences." Her face twisted into a hateful expression. "You know what? Dad was right to leave you. You're useless. It would have been better if you had died." Her cruel words hung in the air, shocking even the onlookers into silence. But this time they didn't hurt me like they used to. This time, I felt only pity for the angry, bitter woman my daughter had become. Without saying another word, I turned and walked back to my car. Before getting in, I spoke to the Patricks. "If she comes back or tries to break in again, call the police. She has no right to be here." As I drove away, I caught one last glimpse of Julie in my rearview mirror. Her face was a mix of shock and fury. But for the first time, her anger didn't affect me. I was free. In the months that followed, I fully embraced my new life. I took up painting and found joy in splashing colors across a canvas. My health kept improving, and every day I felt stronger and more alive. Julie never called or tried to contact me again. Sometimes, I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we had lost. But mostly, I felt relief. I had spent so many years trying to fill the endless pit of her needs. Now, for the first time, I was living for myself,